Hello, everyone. Today we want to do something a little bit different than normal. We usually do a video about just our travels and what we're doing and kind of like our life experiences as we're going. Because we've been here in Annapolis for a few weeks and it's really primarily been focused on repairs and socializing, just meeting all these people and getting to know them and other sailors. It's very challenging to do that and also have the camera and really bring kind of the same content we normally do when we are sailing and out there. So this week we decided to do something a little different and really just focus on more of a Q&A. What are some of the questions that we've been asked pretty consistently by people we've met who are either other sailors or people who just ask us questions about, what are we doing and why are we doing it? So today we really thought we would just focus on just walking through some questions that we've been asked. We have a little list here that we're going to run through, and we'll use that to give more background on ourselves, what we're doing and why we're doing it. Number one question we get asked is, who we are and what did we do before we started sailing? Who I am. So I was born in New York City, grew up there most of my life. I went to college in New Jersey, and for the most part, Spun and I got married when we were in our early 30s. So we actually knew each other from a very early age. We actually dated in middle school. Spun and I broke up with me at the end of middle school. So I kind of resented her for a little while after that. We ended up in the same high school together. But eventually we made up and we became friends towards the end of high school. We kept in touch for many years. So we both went our different paths through life. I went off to college. I actually knew at a very early age that I wanted to be a software developer. So I think from the age of maybe 13, my father bought me one of these by today's standards, a very old underpowered computer. But I knew that I wanted to, after really playing around with it for not very long, started playing games on it, thinking about how to modify those games, learning how to program. And I just really enjoyed that. And I just really took that with me to college, went into computer science. I got a job right out of college for a small startup, worked there for some years, eventually moved over to Bloomberg, which is a very much larger software company, and I enjoyed many productive years there, eventually moving up to a managing position, managing teams of developers. That's who I was before we started any of this. I knew that when we got married, that we loved to travel, that we loved to really go places and see the outside world. We visited many countries. We were also very big divers. So every year for my birthday, since maybe 3-4 years ago, Spun and I planned a trip off to Grand Cayman, and we would go there to dive. That was really us. We would go hiking, we would travel a lot, and we would go diving whenever we had the opportunity. And we loved warm weather diving. We'd really mostly dive the Caribbean, so we always knew that we enjoyed being in the tropics very much, even though we lived in New York.
Yeah, and I was born in India, but I came over to New York when I was about 11 years old, and I've been a New Yorker since then. And we met when we were 13, and we have been friends for a very long time. After college, I went off to medical school, and I graduated and became a developmental behavioral pediatrician. And after we decided to do this, and we decided that sailing and cruising was something that we'd be interested in, I actually took some time off to do a boot camp, which was called the Grace Hopper program. Basically, a 6-month boot camp that took somebody like me who knew very, very little amount of JavaScript and self-taught and made a software engineer out of me, because we knew that we would be on the boat and we knew that we wanted remote-friendly jobs. And as incredibly awesome it is to be a physician on the boat cruising, it is not very remote-friendly, although there are tons of more opportunities now, which we would maybe take on later in our cruising life. But for now, we are sort of prepped up with the software engineer side. Dave has a ton more experience than I do, but it's something fun that we can do together, including something like designing a game.
When and how did we get introduced to sailing? I think the first time, so actually both of our families are very not boat people, I guess. There's very little, sailing or boating at all within our families, right? The most we've ever seen is really some of my cousins who are interested in fishing and who will go out on boats to go fish.
And just to clarify, he is West Indian and I am East Indian, as you would say. I was born and raised in southern India, and Dave, while born in New York City, his family is actually from Guyana, which is in South America, or the West Indies, as they say. So one thing that I think both of our cultures have very much in common is that they're not big water people.
Yeah, it's pretty low on the list. I would say I'm probably the first person in my family who really learned how to swim. On his family, it's also very rare to swim. Yeah. We didn't grow up in families at all that were, I don't think anybody in our families has ever sailed at all. So it was definitely very out there. Really, the story was that I was following a channel called, another YouTube channel called How to Drink, which is an excellent channel, by the way. You should definitely check it out. We'll link it below. But that channel actually had an episode where he just basically mentioned, because it was a pirate or boat themed drink, and he mentioned that he'd been watching a channel called Gone with the Winds. So, I checked it out. I watched a couple of episodes, and one day I came over to Spandan and I said, hey, we should do this when we retire. We should get on a boat and we should go travel the world on our boat, because that seems like a really cool idea. He
actually sent me a link of an episode from Gone with the Winds, and I was on my lunch break between patients and I decided to watch a little bit of it, and I was like, people live on a boat? Like, their whole life they move on to a boat, and these two had done such an incredible job of it that I actually ended up binging their whole channel in the next few months and sort of, agreed, you know what? When we retire, let's do this. And that sort of started a ball rolling into the direction of sailing, but we had put it aside. And starting about 2018 January, when we went diving in Grand Cayman, one of the dive masters sort of looked at us and said, Grand Cayman is a fantastic place to dive, but I think you guys come here every year, you've done this a few times, you should go farther, explore more of the world. Why do you keep coming back here? Because it is very safe and it's what we knew. So we said, okay, so we took 2018 to sort of think about it, and 2019 we made the decision that we would go backpacking. We would go backpacking all around the world for perhaps maybe a year or two, and we would start it in, February or March of 2020, and we said, okay, so let's spend the rest of this year sort of setting ourselves up. And
well, I mean, a big part of that too is that when we started looking at some of the places he was talking about, Raj Amput, the Galapagos Islands, these are not easy places to get to, and the diving there is world class. But to get there, for instance, for Raj Amput, right, you take a plane to Indonesia, there's another plane to a smaller part of Indonesia, you take a ferry, and then you can't even get to Raj Amput directly. You have to go live on a charter boat, what's called liveaboard diving, and you live on that boat, and that's how you get to the actual dive site. When we learned about that, right, that's not a small thing, right? I think it takes a couple days to get all the way out there, to then spend a week or so on the boat and then come back. It's a big investment of time. And not necessarily that we didn't want to do that, but also that we started thinking about, well, if we really want to get to these remote places and do these things and see the world and dive these really incredible parts of the world, that was a big time investment. And just the vacation time that we had every year between her job as a pediatrician and my job as a manager, we had a decent amount of time. But a lot of these places, we'd also started hearing, okay, well, the reefs are starting to, the coral reefs are starting to die off because of pollution and global warming. And, maybe some of these opportunities just won't be there in a few years, right? Or even, a decade or so. So if we want to go to these places, we want to experience these things, we've got to, get a move on and really start doing that. And that conversation grew because we'd also had friends who, had made big plans for their lives and decided to, okay, maybe 5 years from now, we'll go off and do this big thing. And we actually talked to a lot of people as well who were diving, that we met while we were diving. And they basically said the same thing, right? That, you can make all these plans. You can say, okay, hey, 5-10 years from now, or when we retire, we'll move on to a boat, or we'll do this other crazy thing. But you may never get that chance, right? Things happen. And we didn't want to wait for things to happen we didn't want time to make that decision for us. We wanted to take that leap. We had the opportunity, we had the money for it, we thought. So we came with this idea for backpacking, so we could take a couple of years off, go and see the world, go do all these things that we had decided we really wanted to do.
And we started to watch all the YouTube channels, Kara and Nate, and Abroad in Japan, all of these crazy travel channels. And the Vaga brothers were a big inspiration. And we started to organize everything. And in January 2020, we said, all right, let's start booking these places. We are going to go. We're going to give our jobs, a 6-month, 2-month notice, whatever it is, however long it takes to get set up. And then things changed in 2020. And as everyone knows, the pandemic came about and started to get serious and sort of shut the world down. And so we said, well, we can't go backpacking around the world when there's a global pandemic. At first, we said, let's wait and see if it blows over. And it didn't. And we said, well, we could just wait, a few years and go back. But we had started the ball rolling about this idea. And so we said, okay, what else can we do? And that's when we had the idea to do van life. And so we jumped into van life and we said, let's watch all the big van lifers, Eamon and Beck and Alex and Lee and, all of these channels. And we sort of got into it and we were going to plan our van build and everything. And then we started to realize that, well, the borders aren't opening. So we can see the rest of the U.S., but that's about it. And a lot of the U.S. was opening and shutting and opening and shutting. And so we started to talk about it and we said, well, what about this sailing idea? It's crazy, but why don't we not wait till we retire? I mean, we are already getting to an age where, we kind of know what we want. And why do we need to wait till we retire? Why don't we just do this now? And that was about August, I think. August of 2020.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too is that we were looking at backpacking and van life as a way of preparing ourselves, right, for sailing eventually, for liveaboard cruising. And we knew that, these were steps we wanted to take along that road, right? Maybe living in a van would help us figure out, building things and maintaining things and living in a very tiny home. And backpacking would also just let us kind of jump straight into that. So backpacking was out because of the pandemic, and van life was, we can do this. It is expensive to buy and build out a van and travel the U.S. Or we can just go straight to the thing that we think we would eventually want to do, right? It was a retirement plan because we both thought, hey, this is something that we are both really interested in and really see as a incredibly interesting way of life. So yeah, let's skip a couple of steps, I guess. Let's just jump straight into it.
So as soon as things started to open up, we contacted the local sailing school in Manhattan, Atlantic Yachting Club, and we asked, do you give classes to people who've never sailed before? And yeah, ASA 101, 102 was a weekend course. So we took it and we learned how to sail on the Hudson. We learned how to sail near Lady Liberty and learned all about the wind between Manhattan and New Jersey, which was fun. We completely had the bug. We realized we took the classes and we absolutely loved it. And so we started to put everything else in motion. November, I quit my job as a physician and I jumped into the Grace Hopper program because I knew that one day we would want remote friendly jobs, and to have a software engineer background would be very helpful in, having an income on the boat without having to put the boat away or walk away from cruising life. And We didn't renew our lease for January in our Manhattan apartment. We actually moved in with my family for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And in January, we started to look for a boat. We took ASA 103, 104 in St. Petersburg in the middle of negotiations for Turtle, which was insane because, you know, we had such limited experience, but we knew what we wanted. And we knew that once we had Turtle, we would take our time to learn everything else that we would need to learn about sailing and cruising and living aboard and everything. And we found Turtle in Annapolis, and that's a funny story all by itself.
Yeah, so I guess the next question on our list was, how do we prepare for moving aboard? So Spunna's already mentioned that a big part of that was taking sailing lessons on the Hudson. So in addition to ASA 101 and 102, we spent much of last year, 2020, towards the end, taking sailing classes on the Hudson, which were open as a pandemic progressed. We did a lot of private sails with them. We learned a lot of the skills we needed to. And then we started doing things like going to welding classes, learning how to weld because we thought there might be metal work involved. And so far hasn't been useful, but it's good to know.
We didn't know that they gave welding classes. We took a 4-hour welding class in Brooklyn, which was incredible. And if anybody's in New York and has a weeknight free, you should definitely take this amazing classes that are available all over the city, which is just such an incredible opportunity.
In addition to that, Spunna's mom knew how to sew. A big thing we'd seen on a lot of sailing channels and in our research is that there's canvas, there's upholstery, there's sails. Things will break, things will want to be upgraded, and it's much, much cheaper. We just bought a machine this past weekend to do a sail ride, one of these big machines that can do a lot of the jobs you want to get done on a boat. And so last year we sat down with her, Spunna's mom, learned how to sew from her, started watching a lot of YouTube videos on things like canvas repair and sail repair, and just got us ready for that type of thing. Spunna did a couple of projects at her brother's house, and that really got us into the idea of making things ourselves and building them out more. I started learning more about electricity and, eventually what we would need to do to get lithium, because we thought based on what we'd seen on other channels, we might want to do something like that. I knew there was definitely electrical work involved in a boat. So yeah, towards the end of last year, it was just a lot of thinking about what are the skills we need, how do we build up those skills, and the trip that Spunna was talking about to St. Petersburg was very similar, where we basically did a 30-hour road trip. We did a 30-hour road trip down to Florida from New Jersey, something like that. And we made a 30-hour road trip down to New Jersey. Took a week-long class down there and lived on a boat for the first time for a week. And that gave us the understanding that we could actually do this and that we enjoyed living on a boat. And, things like, hey, can I sleep while the boat is rocking around in a dock? And the answer was yes. And that was true for both of us. Yeah.
And mind you, we're in the middle of negotiating for Turtle. So we've already kind of jumped in, and we were just so happy to find out that Dave used to get seasick when we used to go diving. He didn't on the boat, which was fantastic. We both enjoyed, just sleeping and living and cooking and using the restroom, which is very different on a boat. And none of that affected us. I think a big thing that helped was that we both had lived in very small apartments in the city together, so we were already used to small spaces and adjusting to small spaces. But this is a whole new level, and I think we were just really happy that this decision we'd made seemed to have been a really good one, and we were happy that our negotiations for Turtle were going ahead, and just the dream of it started to become very much a big reality, which was really exciting, coming on to about February of 2020.
Yeah. Which brings us to 2021. Yeah. So that brings us to our next question, which is, what was boat shopping like? How did we go through that process? How did we eventually arrive at Turtle? So I think we started really in 2020. We started looking at boats in New Jersey and New York, and places that were closer to us. And we actually saw quite a few boats in the New York, New Jersey area in the fall, winter of 2020. There was actually, I guess, the first catamaran. It was a Prout that we saw in New York. We were so excited to just get on a boat that was large and seemed like a lot of space that we were very close to making an offer at that point, actually. And we kind of stepped back for a second and said, maybe we need to look at a few more boats before we really move ahead with that.
Maybe not put an offer on the very exact first sailboat that you ever put your, get on after taking ASA 101, 102. We just kept looking, and we started to do research. YouTube channels like the O'Kellys were a huge help to us, and Ryan and Sophie's Adventures were a huge help because they had put together sort of these guides of, what it's like on a monohull versus a catamaran, and how to make that decision, and what the realities of living on each of them were, and buying each of them were, and budgeting for repairs on each of them were like. And so we started to build a list. We love Excel sheets, so we built an Excel sheet, and as December rolled in and January rolled in, we started to make appointments to come go see these boats. So we made appointments for our first set of appointments were New York and New Jersey, and we looked at a ton of boats there, mostly monohulls. I think after being on the Prout and then being on a few monohulls and learning more about it, we decided our first boat, it would be better for it to be a monohull. So we started to sort of focus in on them quite a bit and sort of picked a budget of how much we wanted to spend and saw everything under that budget. So, whatever company it was and however old it was.
So a big part of that was we knew that as I mentioned before, we wanted to go to remote places like Indonesia, and that involves crossing oceans. So we needed to have a boat that could potentially cross an ocean. We still are not 100% sure of what all the criteria might be for that requirement, and that's something we're still learning. But we at least knew at the time that we needed to look at a boat that was ocean going, was proven at least to go to the Caribbean at the very least, because we knew we wanted to go there. So basically not a coastal cruiser, something that was hopefully designed for and solid enough to handle the ocean. We also had a relatively, I think, a reasonable budget for the boat. And that really kind of narrowed down our possibilities, and it kind of pushed us in one direction, which was, older monohulls that were built for ideally crossing an ocean. But we really also realized that we didn't know very much at the time. It's not to say that we know that much more now, but at the time that we didn't know that much about boats and about sailing. So let's see a lot of different boats. Let's kind of go across the spectrum. Let's see what's out there. And that'll give us a good feeling for what's available at the price points that we're interested in. And also, what do we just enjoy seeing, and what about a boat kind of appeals to us. And as we would see a boat, people would mention things to us, and they'd be like, oh, well, this has a shoal keel, and we'd be like, okay, and we'd go home and research what a shoal keel was. And actually that was really helpful to understand, okay, well, this is a full keel, this is a shoal keel, this is different types of rudders and rudder protection, and the different pros and cons of all these things, because for everything out there was a pro and a con. What really also helped was our sailing school, Atlantic Yachting. We actually got in touch with one of the people there, and they recommended a boat broker to us up in New York. And we started working with him, and he was great to kind of help us understand what we were and weren't getting, was our understanding correct about some of these different pros and cons of different things that we saw on different boats, and also just opened our eyes a little bit more. We were looking at primarily 25 to 35 foot boats, and when we explained what we wanted to do, he very much pushed us in a direction of saying, and not in a pushy way, but he was very much encouraged to say, hey, here's a 40 foot boat. Why don't you go check it out? let me know what you think of it. And when we did that, it actually really opened up our eyes to the idea that, look, maybe a 25-foot boat for two people trying to just live on it and have all the spares and all the equipment you need for world travel might be challenging. And definitely people do that. But maybe for our first boat, that'd be a little tough if that's what we wanted to do with it.
Yeah. The introduction to the boat broker was really a big turning point for us because I think it gave us someone to bounce ideas off of. So far, we just had each other. We didn't have any sailing friends. We didn't have any family members who could go with us who would know more than us. And having been introduced to somebody who was a professional, who was a sailor himself, he had his own sailboat. So he understood what it is that we might be looking for and what we should be looking for. And he sort of broadened our horizon too, especially when it comes to the size of the boat. So we started to make a list and we started to look at more boats. And one weekend, on a 3-day weekend, we planned to look at 13 boats. So between Deltaville, Virginia, Annapolis, Maryland, and some of the areas surrounding Annapolis, we looked at 13 boats. And one of those boats was Turtle. And she was in a yard on the Hard in Annapolis, and she was beautiful. She wasn't perfect. There were a lot of dings here and there and some gel coat repair that was a little questionable, and we weren't sure if that was just superficial or if it was actual structural damage. And we made a decision. We spoke with our broker and we said, let's go ahead with the survey, and if a problem comes up and if you were going to ask around and make sure we get lots of opinions about this, and if it turns out to be just superficial, we don't need a pretty boat. We want a boat that we are comfortable in and that has good rigging and that has a good salon and Pullman berths. Once we found out what that was, became suddenly really important to us. And we had our checklist, but she was our favorite that we looked at, and so we went ahead and set up the sea trial for her.
Yeah, so I guess other things that really helped with the decision to buy Turtle. So coming into our next question, which we already answered some of, which is, why did we choose Turtle? Really, the biggest factor for me was just we knew that we wanted to go offshore, and we were looking for a lot of the features that, compared to many other boats we saw, right, that it was a boat that was designed for really being able to handle things like rough seas. So she had a full keel. Compared to some of the other boats we saw, the interior as well as the exterior just felt very solid. And as we read more about the Caliber 40, we found that there was a lot of decisions made. They have a whole manual brochure you can download off their website, but it goes into a lot of these details and things that we already were looking for. The way the chain plates were installed, how solid all the interior was, the coaming on the cockpit, basically how protected it is from water kind of spilling into it, and also things falling off, a very solid tow rail. The design of the boat overall was just something that we were looking for. And there was some smaller things, like Splendida doesn't like steps being bent upwards as you're going up, because
I am a klutz, and I fall off things a lot.
Yes.
I fall a lot, and I stub my toe a lot. And one of the things that we'd seen in a lot of boats that we'd seen looked at that weekend was, I sort of kept picturing myself just sliding down those stairs at full speed, and most of them didn't feel like, like Dave was saying, like solid, it just, and I got onto Turtle and I came down the stairs and it felt like stairs out of a house, very wide, very solid. I didn't need to find the stair, it was just there. And so in the dark, and it had handrails on both sides that were at comfortable height and everything. And once I came down, there was another immediate handrail to hold on to. And it just felt like somebody who'd been a cruiser had designed this boat, because of just all the places that you had that would either you could catch onto or that would catch you if you were sort of being swung back and forth.
We loved a big thing was also the area we're in right now, the table being able to be put away, just opening up the space overall, and just the overall feel of the boat, even though it doesn't have, some of the more modern windows. There's a ton of light that comes in during the day. It's something we really appreciate. It makes it a little harder to film because sometimes you get sun shining on your face while you're trying to film, but it's been really nice to see the number of hatches and port lights all over the boat, and that was also a big factor for us. One of the last things that it's relatively small and minor, but having a mostly separate shower has been really great, just to feel like, okay, we can take a shower and not have to worry that our entire head is just covered in water, which has mostly worked out on Turtle, but we're very happy with, those are things we had when we started, and now that we've had it for a while, those things have continued to be things that we're happy about with the purchase of Turtle overall.
Yeah, and it's just been such a comfortable home. And now that we have been on the Atlantic Ocean, we have fully tested all the handrails and all the places for your hip to kind of catch you. And it matters, We've seen these boats that have these sort of huge open galleys, which is awesome for counter space and for just the openness of a boat. But yeah, you fly across the room when you get a bad wake or you get, a bad wave crashing into you. It matters that there's something to catch you. So extremely happy with her so far. And, we think she's going to take us much farther than the Caribbean, hopefully. And, she's never been past the Caribbean in her history. But I think she'll be with us for a long time. So next question.
Next question was, what was the purchasing process like for Turtle? I think for the initial part, thankfully, our broker helped walk us through a lot of it as far as...
Thank you, Jim.
Yes.
We really love you, Jim. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
So how do we make the offer? So making the offer, right, putting together, okay, here's exactly what we're going to offer for it, receiving the counter offer, which we accepted. And we were happy with the price overall, given the issues and the issues that she had, the things we needed to fix up, and where we thought her value was. So once that was done, really the main next step was a sea trial, and part of that was finding a surveyor. That was easier as well, because it actually turned out that the person who'd done this last survey on Turtle was in Annapolis. He was already familiar with the boat. He could probably tell us, what has changed over the last couple of years. So we actually got him to do the survey. There was a big gap there because we made the offer in February and it was accepted, but the surveyor wasn't available for, I think it was something like another month. The day that he was supposed to come on the boat, that weekend there was a massive snowstorm, and the yard itself, when we called them, said, look, we're not doing a sea trial, or we're not going to launch the boat into the water on Monday because we're still clearing out ice, so you guys need to reschedule. And then we reached out to the surveyor, he already had a busy schedule, so we had to push it out by another couple of weeks. So there was a big gap between us making the offer and us actually getting onto the boat itself.
And the sea trial day, and when it came, even though it was a month later, was still one of the coldest days of the month. It was about 28 degrees, I think. And so we were all sort of bundled up and chatting but shivering and sort of getting on the boat. And I remember the moment when I realized that I loved this boat was we were up top and the surveyor was down here, and he was looking through all the systems and he was turning all the systems on. And one of the systems he had turned on that I didn't realize he turned on was the heat. And I come down from 28-degree weather, wind is blasting, my fingers are frozen, and I come down to this comfortable sort of 65 degrees boat, and I just said, oh my God, I love this boat so much. And the rest of the sea trial
Which is also funny because air conditioning and heating was not on our list at all. all because we figured we'd always be in the tropics, but it was a very nice bonus that Turtle did have those things when we bought her.
And we, the sea trial was very interesting. So our broker and the seller's broker were the captains. And so they were sort of in charge of taking her out. And we had decided and insisted that she sail, so that the sails come out, even, engine on or off. We wanted to see her sail. And they opened up the furling system, in-mast furling system, and we just heard ball bearings just falling to the ground and falling on the deck, and sort of the boat brokers sort of shocked looking at it. And we said, oh, thankfully that was not us. We did not do this to this boat. And, they all had a discussion, and turned out something small in the in-mast furling had broken, and they needed to get it repaired. And the seller's broker immediately said this was something that was going to be covered and it's not going to be an issue. And the surveyor was there, so he, had put it into a survey that needed to be fixed before we bought the boat. Otherwise, Turtle actually had relatively very few things that the surveyor found that needed immediate attention, and we had otherwise a very great sea trial. Except we got back, and we started to talk about whether or not we wanted the boat, and a large part of it was, well, she's definitely not going to be ready tomorrow to take away and sail, because the mast has to come down for this repair to happen. And we had no idea how long that would be, because we had already started to hear some grumblings and mumblings about how much COVID had affected the supply industry and the workforce. So we were a little worried.
The marine service industry was backlogged because so many people were buying a boat because of COVID, and I guess similar ideas to us that, okay, well, if I can't go travel, I might want to have a boat. So there was a huge influx of demand into the industry, especially around that time, which was, I guess, coming into March and April. A lot of people were, the winter was finishing up, and a lot of people were looking at boats and saying, okay, I want to buy this boat and I need all these things done now that I've bought it. A big factor too for that decision. So we got back, we'd seen the sea trial, so we knew all the issues with the boat. The surveyor had given us a list. We'd gotten, advice from our broker as far as, here are the problems. Are these surmountable problems? And we knew already wanted the boat before that. So the issues listed were things that were either being covered by the seller, things like the mast, things like the refrigerator wasn't working, or when we looked into what the surveyor said should be fixed, were all things that we felt were reasonable and we could tackle. It was, I think, an easy decision from that point to want to move ahead. The main thing holding us back was the mast. We wanted to know, okay, what was the status of that? How long was it going to take? And what was going on with it? So we actually arrived at a bit of a crossroads, because when the mast was taken down, we spoke with the company that was working on it, which they were the ones who originally installed it, and they were doing everything under basically warranty. They were going to repair everything. They paid for hauling the boat out, taking the mast off and getting it ready to be worked on, which is a pretty big cost. And, their basic response was, hey, we're going to cover the fixing the furling system. Before we do that, before we finish that, we could also replace the standing rigging on the boat, because it sounds like you guys want to sail it around the world, but you don't yet own the boat. So do you want to pay for that even though you don't own the boat? And of course, our answer was, I guess we should own the boat before we pay for this, which means we have to buy it before the mast is back on and the boat is fully ready and tested with these repairs. And at the time we said, you know what? We feel really confident that we want this boat. We feel confident that the people working on it seem like they're going to keep their word to really make this functional. So yeah, we spoke with the brokers, and I think it was maybe a week later we owned the boat, and Turtle was now ours. A boat sitting on the hard with no mast, broken refrigerator, and a bunch of repair projects to do. And at that point, we basically moved to Annapolis. We lived out of a hotel for an entire month. I was still working. Spandana was going to the boat every day and just getting projects done and getting it ready for us to take on some of these larger projects and just kind of figuring out what was here and doing an inventory, like what actually is on the boat, because we didn't have a full list of that either.
And Turtle had sat on the Hard for 2 years while she was on sale. So there was a lot to clean. There was a lot, like Dave said, a lot to inventory itself. I mean, we had a list of the big stuff that was on the boat because it was part of the agreement to sell the boat. But all the little things, there were bags and bags of spares that were left back and things that should have been on the boat that we would need eventually that weren't because they were probably great and the previous owners took it with them, or whatever it was. And so the first month was basically spent cleaning and organizing, and and actually that's where you came in. The first week we owned Turtle was our first video and boat tour. So you've been with us from the very beginning. You've been with us through all the discoveries and the hatch repairs that followed, and sort of all the steps that followed after that, and our journey with her so far. So it's been quite a fascinating, quick journey from no idea how to sail to ownership of a boat to moving in and sort of jumping in with all hands on deck, as they say. And it's been really, really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that really kind of covers a lot of the things that happened before we bought the boat. This is our first time doing one of these Q&A style videos, and we hope that was helpful, because we do meet a lot of people and they ask us these questions, right? How did we get into this, and why did we get into this, and what was the entire process like? And a lot of our videos from that point forward have shown a lot of that. Hopefully that was helpful for you all to kind of understand where we're coming from and why we're doing this. And
I think one last question that a lot of people ask us is about the future. Okay, you like cruising. What do you want to do? What do you want to get out of your YouTube channel? What do you want to get out of sailing? What do you want to get out of cruising? Have you given up your careers forever? And I think a lot of that is we don't know. And, we absolutely love cruising, and I think we both have careers that we can fall back to, either full-time or remote. We don't see ourselves stopping cruising anytime soon, even though we miss our friends and family like crazy. Both friends before sailing and friends that we've made after sailing. We definitely miss leaving them every single time. And the question of, if we're still having fun with this, what do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, we feel like we're just getting started, honestly.
Yeah. And I think what we want from the channel is just to open ourselves up. This is our adventure and we want to share it with everybody. We also want to have a little bit better representation out there in the sailing world. We don't see many couples like us out there, either on YouTube or off YouTube. We've actually yet to meet an Indian couple. One recently contacted us from the UK saying that they'd found us, and that's literally the first time that I've heard of another Indian couple, East Indian and West Indian, or West Indian. And I think that's important. I never saw anybody who looked like me when I was searching through all 40, 50 YouTube channels, sailing channels, and I think it's really important for that. And it's important for us to share our journey so that our nieces and nephews and our family and our friends can see that this is worth it. This is exciting. And that as much as that we miss them, this is what we want to do. And to share that with everybody has been such a fantastic experience, as we saw at the Annapolis Boat Show, when people came up to us and said, that they watched our videos and now we're friends with them. And I think that's incredible. So what holds for the future is going south for now to the Caribbean, and then just keep going. As long as we have fun and we are enjoying cruising, I think we are going to keep sailing. And we hope you come along on this grand adventure with us, and on the lows and highs and everything in between. And and we'll see you next week when we get a little power hungry. Yeah, that's happening.
All right, we'll see you on Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.